welcome to Newsline. I'm Isabel Waller.
And I'm Rachel Hocking. Coming up today, Human Rights Commissioner Tim Wilson voices his concern about the Abbott government's treatment of asylum seekers. And is it safe to eat fish caught in the Yarra?
But first we cross to news correspondent Dylan Fox-Carney. And Dylan, the Abbott government is not winning friends among the state and territory leaders.
No, Isabel. Following the drastic plans to cut education and health funding to states and territories in Tuesday's federal budget, New South Wales Premier Mike Baird has called for an emergency meeting to convene this Sunday. The states are demanding the federal government rethink its plans. A projected $18 billion will be cut from hospitals and schools, leaving the states to fill the gap. This will most likely come in the form of increased taxes, with a rise in GST being anticipated. State premiers, including a number closely associated with Prime Minister Tony Abbott, have said they did not know the cuts were coming. States and territories are divided on the way forward, but most will be attending to coordinate a response to the budget. In other news, parliamentary language has come into focus after Federal Education Minister Christopher Pyne called the Leader of the Opposition, Bill Shorten, the C word in Parliament. According to Mr Pyne, he actually said grub. Many thousands have listened to the incident thanks to YouTube, and the C word seems pretty clear in any event. Christopher Pyne got off scot-free by Speaker Bronwyn Bishop. Odd, considering former PM Julia Gillard was previously censured for just using the word grub.
Streets to find out what the public think about Pyne's slip-up.
He just opens his mouth and lets the wind blow his tongue around.
I just don't think it achieves anything. I think it's offensive and it just creates extra conflict.
I think Parliament's become a bit of a bear pit. It's interesting to compare it with how things go in the House of Commons, but I think the danger of anyone actually listening sincerely and responding genuinely, as opposed to hacking out pre-prepared policy statements, is very low.
You know, whatever you say in Parliament, is just in Parliament. It's not the point. It's about that reflection throughout the whole of the country.
I think it's a place where it should be more formal, not terribly, but I think it shouldn't be swearing or anything like that.
And you can see the whole of the world disintegrating. The people don't care what they say on telly. At least in the newspapers, they only put F and a couple of little dots.
The current political stance on the Racial Discrimination Act and offshore processing of asylum seekers begs the question: is Australia upholding its human rights obligations to its most vulnerable people? One of the Abbott government's first appointments was making fellow Conservative Tim Wilson a Human Rights Commissioner. While asylum seeker advocates feared Mr Wilson would turn his back on the plight of asylum seekers, Erin Handley reports Mr Wilson is not shy about standing up for their rights.
It was a controversial appointment that sparked a debate across the nation about what human rights actually are. The newest Human Rights Commissioner, Tim Wilson, comes from a classical liberal perspective and sees rights as belonging to individuals, not groups.
People have a right to freedom of speech. People have a right to freedom of association. They have a right to freedom of thought. But they don't have a right to be free of something in the way that people are suggesting.
In the words of Attorney General George Brandis,
people do have a right to be bigots,
Rachel Ball from the Human Rights Law Centre has a different perspective. She says we cannot ignore the rights of minority groups.
In Australia, we know that the people whose rights are most likely to be violated are people who belong to particular groups, and those violations are often characterised by discrimination.
Both sides agree, however, on one thing. Australia's asylum seeker policy violates the fundamental right to liberty.
I think that the current policy raises very, very serious issues about the right to not be unlawfully detained, because people are being held in detention centres for prolonged periods of time without any clarity or certainty about when they are going to get out.
Australia's treatment of asylum seekers and refugees is definitely an area in which we're getting worse and not better.
Human rights advocates say it is up to the Australian people to judge if the ends justify the means, but they cannot make an informed decision with the government withholding crucial information about detention centres.
We have a reasonable right, both the Commission and the media, to go and scrutinise them and to make sure they're meeting our obligations and expectations of humanity.
History appears to be repeating itself, with the Human Rights Commission this year launching a new inquiry into children in detention, just as they did 10 years ago. The problems from last decade remain unsolved.
There's still over 1,000 children in immigration detention today, and even though the very serious harm that does to children was exposed 10 years ago, we still haven't fixed the problem.
Erin Handley, Newsline.
Thanks, Erin. Time for business news now with Choi Nan-Curvis.
Thanks, Rachel. Business mogul James Packer was knocked out for his bid on Las Vegas casino The Cosmopolitan by US property group Blackstone. It's understood that Mr. Packer had been wanting to return to the US market for some time, but was edged out with a conservative bid for the famous hotel and casino. Current owners, the Deutsche Bank, said that Blackstone had paid $1.7 billion US, almost half of the original purchase price. Locally, the Commonwealth Bank has been hit with a class action by thousands of disgruntled investors following poor financial advice from the company. The bank could now face up to $250 million in damages, with lawsuits also against ANZ, Westpac and NAB, in the biggest class action in corporate history. Casinos and banks sometimes go hand in hand with high-income earners, who will have a 9-month loophole to avoid the high-income tax levy outlined in this week's federal budget. Someone on $200,000 were to take out a salary package with a $20,000 company car, this would take their annual income down to $180,000 per annum, effectively avoiding the levy altogether. Back to you, Isabel.
Thanks, Troy. Still to come on Newsline, we take a look at fishing in the CBD's Yarra River. Are the fish toxic?